Yeah, so this is the first Dharma talk for a new year. So I want to kind of, with the emphasis on new, and when we had our New Year's ceremony here on January 1st, we call it beginning anew. In the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, that phrase is very important because many people feel that they just sort of endlessly have to kind of do things the way they've always done it, and that can mean both inwardly and outwardly. And we hope that we can do a little, massaging of that, to make it a little better. But the idea that I can begin anew, I can begin fresh, I can, starting every moment, I can begin to chart my life in a new direction, is not generally known by people. Or if it's known, it's an intellectual knownness. So this is a new year. In our community, at the ceremony, we did a number of things, but one of the things is, of course, is set our aspirations and intentions for the coming year. Yesterday there was a half-day workshop here on how to set vows and aspirations and how to... So how are people doing on the aspirations and goals and intentions they set last Wednesday? Last Wednesday. Just close your eyes, and if you did, think about things you want to do differently this year, both inwardly and outwardly. How are you doing? Just going to take a moment just to do a little self-assessment, evaluation. Some people may go, gee, what were my intentions? I knew at the time they seemed very important and I was very committed to them, but I've completely forgotten what they were by now. So again, a little assessment, evaluation. For some it'll be a big reminder, oh yes, that is what I wanted to begin to change. Now I remember. So you may be surprised to know that traditionally in Buddhism, mindfulness, which we sort of have taken to mean sort of living in the present moment, right? That's not what it means in Buddhism. Buddhism, mindfulness the word is smrti, which means to remember. Very important function in life. I am mindful of what I'm doing, and I'm mindful of what I want to do. And I remember, I recollect. That's what keeps me moving in the direction I want. Is it easy to forget? Why is it easy to forget? Well, you just sat in meditation for 25 minutes. Is the mind a stable, permanent thing? You just have the same thought over and over again? No. Endless thoughts coming and going, endless thoughts coming and going. Which means that unless there's some other variable that we bring into our mind, change is very difficult. The mind is very unstable, right? So you may have a wonderful thought to set an intention, how you want to be, right? But within a minute, that thought will what? Disappear. And other thoughts will come in. Other wants, other needs, other intentions. And they are the strong ones. Why are they the strong ones? Because they're the ones we've been cultivating all our life. That's just the way it is. That's not a fault. Don't fault yourself, you know. So mindfulness or remembering or recollecting is a skill, is a competency to be developed. Is that clear? Don't, you know, people get disappointed but they think it's just supposed to be there. Well, I set incredible intentions. I even got up this morning in my meditation. I set my intention for the day. And then gone. And when it goes, what we call our habit energy, that which the way we've been doing it, is the strong energy in each of us. And it's all unique for each of us, but it's the same. So if we want to change, if we want to begin anew, if we want to move our life in a new direction, there has to be this continuous mindfulness of my intentions, my commitments, my vows, my aspirations, and a willingness to be continually recollecting it, remembering it. When? When do you think? All the time. Now, can we do it all the time? Why not? Because you know why. All right? But the more we do it, the more we catch ourselves, the more we stop doing what we've habitually done, whether it's a way of thinking, like it could be thought patterns, right? Some people spend a lot of time replaying the past, right? And I'm not just talking past years ago, but they have a conversation with somebody and then they replay it. And then they replay it. And then they have another, and they replay it. You know what I mean? So living in the past does not just mean past. It can just mean earlier today. It could be yesterday. So many of us, we have this kind of habit energy. Many of us, we go the opposite way. We're always living in the future. We're always anticipating. We're always worrying. We're always thinking about. Many people are always role-playing, right? Before something happens, they're always, that's called living in the future. The other is called living in the past, right? Where many of us are habituated to those patterns of thinking, fantasizing. Okay, it's not going to change by itself. We have to be remembering what? I don't want to do this anymore. This is not good for me. For some it's just a waste of time. We're just endlessly replaying, regurgitating old stuff. But even worse, we often create suffering for ourselves. Because this crazy mind of ours loves to think about and remembering what? What does it have a tendency to want to remember and go over? Negative, bad things. Right? And when we do that, it produces sadness, anger, right? In our mind, disappointment, hurt, right? The same way when we're always anticipating the future, these kinds of thoughts endlessly produce what's called worry, anxiety, fear, right? So we're endlessly, by living in the past and future, cultivating emotional states that are harmful to us. So that's an example. So if you have an intention to live more in the present, you have to know, when your mind wanders away, you have to be able to, mindfulness has to know what's wholesome and unwholesome. I remember. This is not wholesome. This is not a wholesome mind state. This is not a wholesome train of thought. I've been down this road before. I know where it goes. Everybody know those roads? Yeah, we know them. But without mindfulness, without the capacity to know what's going on in my mind and to be able to remember unwholesome, creating suffering for myself, not contributing anything good to me. So I stop that, and I then have to put my mind where? Because if I leave it to its own devices, it's just going to go back there. Have you noticed that? And it doesn't go back there because it wants to go back there. It goes back there because it's habituated to going back there. It's like we've just let it go back there so many times. We've energized those patterns so many times. It just wants to go there. Right? Even though for many of us, we're torturing ourselves, right? Many people, they have a relationship with their mind where their mind is like a tormentor. Anybody know that mind? Yeah, it's a torment. Now, it's not like, if it's all day, it's really bad. But it's just, we know that mind. So, remember what we did earlier today? In our meditation? What does that have to do with what I'm talking about? You see, you may think you're just meditating, trying to calm yourself, focusing on the body, focusing on the breath, calming, stabilizing. But that's not going to really help us in the long run. Okay. What's going to help us is by some degree of calming the mind and clarifying the mind, we can be aware, mindful of what's going on inside it. That's why we do this practice. So we have this capacity, this competency, this ability to be aware, to be mindful of my mind and what's arising in it. And having criteria about what's wholesome and unwholesome. What's my aspiration, what's my intention, and what isn't. Is that clear? And that has to do not only with the thoughts and the mind states of our mind, but this mindfulness, this awareness, has to do with, this thing? Very, very dangerous. If we don't have any control over this thing, if we don't have any criteria in terms of what? Wholesome speech, unwholesome speech. Speech that creates goodness in relationships, in the world, and speech that doesn't, that causes harm or conflict. Right? Our body. Mindful of our body. What's my body up to? What's it up to? Is it doing an activity that's good for it, wholesome for it? Contributing to the kind of life and body I want to have? Or is it indulging in things which I know are harmful, unwholesome, not helpful? So mindfulness of the actions of our body, speech, and mind with criteria of wholesome and unwholesome, now we have what? We have a capacity to move our life very intentionally in the direction we want to move it. So, it's very important that we understand that the way sort of mindfulness has come into our culture, right, which is sort of a psychological technique, which is good. It's helpful. I'm not knocking it. It's good. But it's really not the way it was developed in Buddhism, and mindfulness comes from the Buddhist tradition. This was part of a path, a very essential part of the path that helps us walk our life in the way we want and not walk our life in directions that create suffering for ourselves and others. And suffering's a big word, there are all kinds of meanings to it, but not good. How about that? And that has meaning to all of us. We know what that means, right? Most of us have been, knocked around by life to some degree, some more than others, right? We know what works and what doesn't work. What creates goodness for ourselves and what doesn't. What supports and nurtures goodness and wholesomeness and harmony and all the good stuff in others and what doesn't. I think we know that. There's some people who don't know that, right? And we have names for them. But, But I think that's on the continuum of human beings. I think most people, deep down inside, know better, even if they can't live it. They don't have the tools for change. Are there any questions about, it's a new year. I'm starting right at the basics. Because many of us, we want the bigger stuff, the higher stuff. But if we don't have the basics down, it'll always be wobbly. Our spiritual life, religious life, whatever we call it, will always be wobbly. We'll always be in and out. It'll work, it won't work. We'll end up frustrated, disappointed, all that kind of stuff. So it's very clear that we understand, mindfulness is the foundation. Self-awareness is the foundation. Having clear criteria for my life, that I can assess the actions of my body, speech, and mind, is essential. So any questions about this, or how to do this, or what I'm talking about? If you're online, just chat it into Brian. Anything not clear? Everybody know how to do it? Yes. Is it a long question or a short one that I can repeat? Or do you want it? Or do you want the mic? Well, hey, all right, there you go.
Good morning, I'm Tammy. When I first started coming here, the goal for me personally was to relieve suffering, just not to be suffering so much. I had lost a family member to grief. I was very grief-stricken.
Right.
And being here, I learned more about not just the getting over grief, but just finding more of a plateau in life in general. Mm-hmm. And I really thought the goal was still to alleviate suffering. Mm-hmm. But I'm starting to shift to seeing maybe the goal, you can't alleviate suffering completely because there's just so much up and down in the world. It's always gonna change. Mm-hmm. So I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit more about the goal not to be for things to be all rosy, but the goal to have a better relationship with the ups and downs.
How did you know? This is like, how they do plants, you know what I mean? Thank you, Tammy. That's a good, that's what I wanted to talk about today. But I wanted to get this ground first. So before I respond to Tammy, any questions about just mindfulness practice, recollection, remembering, knowing wholesome from unwholesome, kind of being self-aware throughout the day, right? Doing your best. Sometimes you can catch yourself even before you do it, right? That's really good, isn't it? When you can feel that urge, you can feel that tendency to do something or say something or go down that rabbit hole in your mind, and you go, you catch it right at the beginning. Sometimes we don't catch it till what? We're maybe halfway down. Sometimes we don't catch it till maybe an hour later when we've just gotten ourselves all riled up, or we've gotten other people all riled up, right? You know what so, but it'll get better, you see. Sometimes in the past, we never caught it. We thought like this was the way. And we just kept ourselves and other people riled up all the time. So if you're only, keeping yourself riled up for an hour or two, when you used to keep yourself riled up for days, you're developing. It's important, it's important that we, understand that transformation comes, we can have insights, we can have understandings, clarity. I know I got to change that, but the actual doing, we need patience. We need patience because it's gradual. And yet, without the intention, without the energy, it won't occur. So it's a kind of balance. On one end, we have to, be highly energetic and purposeful and intentional, right? And patient. It's that balance in life. So your question is, yeah, so I thought Buddhism and all this was about the end of suffering and leading a happy, rosy life where everything is good, right? And I'm wondering whether that's maybe not the case in reality. Yeah, so I wanted to, what I wanted to talk about today, since as we said, it's the first day of a new year. And so I think it's important that we, for those who are newer, older, revisit what a spiritual path is about. Right? And for me, specifically, I'm talking about the Buddhist path. I mean, there are many paths. So here, my path has always been the Buddhist path, but there are other paths too. Yeah, so, there's life, right? So everybody in here, whether you're in your 20s or in your 80s, we've all been living life, right? And in that life, we have constantly been interacting. We interacted from the earliest time we've been interacting with our family, with our parents, with our cousins, with our aunt and uncles, with neighbors, with teachers, with coaches, with the kids down the block, right? So we have been constantly interacting and affected by all kinds of things. We've had bodies. Our bodies have been healthy. Our bodies have been sick. Our bodies, have been all kinds of things. Cultural, society, right? We could go on and on and on, right? If we don't understand what's going on, if we don't have clarity of what's going on, and many of us don't, we end up just reacting case by case. So many of us have kind of muddled our way through life, right? Case by case. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Right? And there seems to be no kind of understanding that we develop, so we sort of muddle through this life. We want to be happy, we want a peaceful mind, we want love and goodness and all these things in our life. We don't want to suffer, we don't want others to suffer, we don't want, all these emotional afflictions to be riled us up. And yet what? And yet they still occur. And we seem to be always ping-ponging around from this mind state to that mind state, this relationship to that relationship, this job to that job, this intention to that intention, this thing to that thing that'll make us happy, right? Or end our suffering. So we're endlessly trying to find our way through this. And yet, something seems to elude us because we continually find ourselves repeating old patterns. Does it sound like something that you can relate to? Okay, I just want to, and again, we all have different lives, we all have different karma. So for some of us, it's just been it's been a slog, this life, right? Lots of struggle, lots of difficulty. Other people, it's been a challenge, but yet, so it hasn't. Is that okay? We have to understand everybody's different. We can't compare ourselves to anybody else. So along comes somebody like the Buddha, who sees that. He sees what's going on in life. He sees what's going on among human beings, in his family, in his culture, in his community. And he goes, yeah, there's got to be another way to live this life and not suffer, right? So he spent years, looking deeply into life, meditating, reflecting, practicing, until he really got clarity that there is another way. And this is what he taught, for about 50 years in India, teaching all kinds of people in all kinds of ways. So the first thing he taught was suffering. There is suffering in life, right? All kinds of suffering. There's the suffering of sickness, old age, and death. Just being alive, just having a body, right? Suffering will come to us. Aging is suffering, right? Sickness is a suffering. And death, the fact that everything for everyone comes to a finite end, for most people that's a suffering. Right? It causes us distress, causes us to be afraid, causes us disappointment, all kinds of things. But he said there are other sufferings, that are just seem to be part of life. And he called these the 8 worldly winds, There's gain, but unfortunately there's also what? Loss. What a bummer. Why can't there just be gain? No loss, right? There's health and ill health. There's fame and infamy, you might say. We're liked, we're not liked. We're loved, we're not loved. People think highly of us, people think terrible things about us, right? That's just part of life. There's pleasure, there's pain, right? So he saw all these worldly winds and many others that are just blowing through life, right? There's coming together and parting. And he said these are just the winds that blow through life. The same way the winds blow through the trees and the trees move. The leaves move. What's moving the leaves? The winds. There are all kinds of winds. So he called these are the worldly winds. They're just blowing through everybody's life. Right? And when they blow in this direction, like toward being liked, being loved, being noticed, gain, success, pleasure, human beings are what? Happy. When it blows the other way, how are human beings? Unhappy, dissatisfied, okay. And there are many others, it goes deeper and deeper levels, And so that's the first thing he noticed. But the important thing is his second truth, which he said, there's a cause why human beings suffer in these worldly winds, in the impermanence of this physical body, sickness, old age, and death. There's a cause. So that's very important. Because if we know the cause, then we know that if I remove the cause, then I won't suffer. Is that clear? So it's very practical. So, why do we suffer in the context of the 8 worldly winds? Because our self cannot accept that that's the way it is. Right? Cannot accept sickness, old age, and death. Many people, when they're sick, they're what? Angry. They're sick. They're angry at their bodies. How dare you? I have things to do. How dare this body get sick? How dare this body age? I want to stay young and youthful forever. Disappointed, fearful, all kinds of things. I could go on. So he says it's by not understanding that, these are the breezes of life. Sometimes we'll succeed, sometimes we'll fail, sometimes things will work out, sometimes they won't. Sometimes there'll be pleasure, sometimes there'll be pain, sometimes there'll be gain, sometimes there'll be loss. That's just the way it is. So what the Buddha was teaching, that if you understand how life is, you stop trying to manipulate and control and resist, but you learn to relate to all this in a healthy, wholesome way. So a spiritual path is not about controlling, right? We don't get to that nirvanic state by controlling everything. If I could just get everything perfect in my life. Anybody ever try to get everything perfect? And get all the bad people out, all the good people in, right relationship, right job, right house, right color on the wall, right weather, right geographical place, right? If I can get that all together, then what? Then I'll be happy. But what happens? We forget about what? Impermanence, change. And that there are endless variables we can't control. Right? The weather. So many variables are blowing through this life. So, a spiritual path doesn't teach us how to control, it teaches us how do I relate to. This is important. This is what the Dharma is about. How do I relate to all this? How do I relate to human beings and their penchant for violence? Right? We seem to love to kill each other. I don't say love, you know what I'm saying? But we do it so easily. How do we relate to this unfolding of the world? And just every day when you open your newspaper or people don't open newspapers anymore. Every day when you click, is that the right phrase? When you click or you scroll, what are we reading about? The worldly winds blowing through this world. Right. And not just the worldly winds blowing through this world, but what Buddhism calls the five poisons. Anger and fear and greed and, endlessly blowing through this world. So how do we relate to all this? Right? So we can be at peace. How do I have a peaceful mind? How do I have an open heart? Right? In the midst of all this? Well, it's through understanding, through acceptance, that this is the way things are. Every day when you open, click, or whatever you do, scroll, and if it's not a distortion, it's not what they call fake news, which I guess also is a new reality. But every time you learn about something going on in the world, you go, oh yeah, this is what's going on. And why is it going on? Because of causes and conditions. The winds blow this way, the winds blow that way. I'm not a meteorologist, right? If anybody understands meteorology, you understand why winds are blowing, right? Even though they're invisible. We don't see the wind, we see the leaves moving, or we feel the breeze against our cheek. But do we understand what's causing all that? We don't. But a meteorologist understands, right? Yeah, there are causes why the wind blows this way, or the wind blows that way, or there's no wind today, and tomorrow it just is blowing, 50 miles an hour. They understand these things, right? So we need to understand why things are going the way they are. And very simply, we can say causes and conditions. When we understand that everything in the world and the people in it, which includes us and our friends and our neighbors and our loved ones and our hated ones, are all the same, all being moved by their causes and conditions, we accept that. And that acceptance is not approval, okay? It's not approval, it's not disapproval, it's acceptance. And an acceptance not from disappointment, not from gritting your teeth, but from understanding. I understand everything's impermanent and everything is constantly changing according to causes and conditions. And then the challenge for each of us is what? How do I relate to all this in a way that doesn't create suffering for myself or suffering from others, for others? See, that's where our focus should be. Once we've accepted accepted the impermanence of our body. It's going to get sick, it's going to age, it's going to die. Everybody's going to, once we accept all this, we understand that this is just the way things are. Right? Why is the world the way it is? Because of causes and conditions. Okay. Now, how do I want to relate to that? This is where things get very personal. How do I want to relate to all this? Do I want to let it stir me up every day? Anger, fear, disappointment, sadness. Is that what I want to nurture my mind with every day? Right? There are a lot of people on all sides of the political spectrum that every time they look at the news and whatever they do, it just riles them up. Anybody here ever get riled up when you look at what's going on? Yeah, it just riles you up. Right? And you have to understand that when you're getting riled up one way, there's somebody over there looking at the same information who's very happy. And every time you're looking at something that makes you happy, there could be somebody all riled up about the same information. And that's not good or bad, that is the way things are. So this is very meaningful for us. People. There are lots of people, we don't want them to be the way they are. Is that true? Got a lot of nods on that one. Some people, it's a big list. I mean, they're kind of, irritated all the time. Some people, it's certain people, right? Yeah, we don't want them to be the way they are. Some of us, it's very personal. It could be our parents or this. We don't want them to. Why are they the way they are? Some people, it's even themselves. Right? They're irritated with themselves. They're frustrated or disappointed in themselves. I don't want myself to be the way I am. But again, it's the same thing. It's because I don't accept that I am the way I am because of causes and conditions. They are the way they are because of their causes and conditions. If I had grown up and lived their life and had their parents and everything, I'd be just like them. Is that true? See, we don't think so. Oh, not me. Yeah, but we also are a product of our causes and conditions. So we need certain ways to understand what's going on in this life, so we're not riled up, so we're not angry and scared and disappointed and afraid and are endlessly grasping, endlessly trying to manipulate and change all this. Now, it doesn't mean we don't make efforts to influence other people, life, situations, culture, politics, to move it in a wholesome direction. But it comes from a good place. Thank you, Bill. So that's what we've been talking about now is sort of when Buddhism is called the view. How do I just look at, how do I look at all this? Right? What I'm saying, all of this, and make sense of it. Oh, I get it. I see what's going on here. Yeah, it's the 8 worldly winds and all these other things, and egocentricity, and all these things, and the 5 poisons, they're just blowing through life. Yep. That's just the way it is. Now we come back to, but I'd like to be happy. Right? Yeah, I'd like to be happy. Yeah, I don't want to suffer. I'd like to have a peaceful mind. I'd like to have an open-hearted mind. I'd like to have a spacious mind. I'd like to, right? I'd like to be patient. I'd like to, all the, right? See, so now, this is where we begin to talk about the necessity for an inner life. Right? Because how I relate to all that has a lot to do with what's going on in here. And the in here is our mind. Thoughts, feelings, perceptions. And I realize if I stop acting in ways and thinking about things in ways that cause me suffering and therefore causes suffering to others, how do I change my mind that's habituated to being a certain way, depending on how old you are, for decades and decades and decades, right? So now we come back to things like meditation. Okay? And here I'm not just talking about meditation like formally sitting 20 minutes, 30 minutes, following your breath, you see. Those are just means to developing a mind that is aware. So how do I begin to develop awareness in my life? Self-awareness. So I am aware of what's arising in my mind. How do I develop a meditative capacity? Because another thing, do you remember I said, about an hour and 15 minutes ago, I said, thoughts, feelings, sensations will continue to arise while you're in meditation, right? The trick is let them be. Remember I said that? Is that easy? Why not? Because we're used to what? A thought arises and we just jump on that horse. You know, like, isn't that a joke or something? Or is it a Buddhist thing? I don't know. If somebody comes riding by on a horse really fast and it says, where are you going? And the guy on the horse says, I don't know, ask the horse. Right? So many of us, don't ask me. I just follow the thoughts wherever they go. I just follow the urges wherever they go. I just follow the desires wherever they go. I just follow the emotions wherever they go. Is that clear? So that is the downfall of what we might call a mind that has no self-awareness and has no, you're not going to like this, training. That's the bad news. To be self-aware, to be mindful of one's body's speech and mind, to be able to have some objectivity, that one can watch things arise in the mind and be aware of them. You don't need to stop them. You just don't grab at them. You just don't jump on the horse. That takes what? Practice. That's the bad news. It takes practice. It's not just going to happen. Because our minds are habituated just following thoughts, feelings, perceptions, desires, positive and negative. We just follow. We're just jumping on horses all day long. Right? From the first moment we wake up in the morning, right? Last thing we hear at night, these horses are running around and we're following them. No criteria, no self-awareness, no understanding. I don't have to. Right? In a certain way, freedom means I know I have options. Right? I know I have options. Yeah, this is wholesome. Yeah, I'm going to nurture this one. This is good for me. No, this is unwholesome. It's not good for me. I'm not going to nurture it. I'm going to go nurture that one. So that freedom is inherent within us. if we are self-aware and we can see there's this opportunity to jump on the horse or not jump on the horse, to slow the horse down, to get off. That's my freedom. And that inherent freedom of the mind, again, comes back to, am I clear about where I want to go in life? Now, many of us are clear about, career or, things like that. In our world, we have a lot of clarity about that, right? Or, I want a relationship of this kind. I want a job like this. I want to live in a place like that. See, we have clarity about that, but about the kind of person I want to be, right? The kind of mind and heart I want to live from. We don't have that kind of clarity, so we don't put that kind of energy into that. Right. So that's I guess another thing that a spiritual path gives us is it shows us our potential. Many of us, depending on our life situation, we might not have come across lots of exemplary human beings. Right? Many of us have had a lot of the opposites in life. So, without some sense of the possibility of leading a certain kind of life, never really gets real to us, you see. Because we really don't, we're not aware that that possibility is there, nor do we have people in our life or around us or in society that are really serving as examples and teaching that. If anything, based on what you read in the paper, most of the people we're reading about are what? You can say it, what? Criminals. What else? Narcissists, self-serving, right? Out for themselves, seeking gain for themselves. You know what I'm saying? I mean, most of what we see in this life are not, examples of what I'm talking about. So we have to kind of look in another realm for examples, right? For mentors, for teachers, because the fundamental, like in Buddhism, the Buddha said, everybody has the possibility of being a Buddha. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. And Buddha means, not that you're going to end up looking like this, okay? And this is not a Buddha. This is just a symbolic representation. To be a Buddha means to be awake. To be a Buddha is you're somebody who's awakened all the inherent wholesome capacities of your mind. Oh, see, no one ever told me that that's the real purpose of life. Right? Because in our culture, we think the purpose of life is what? What? Pleasure. Have fun, have pleasure. What else? Money, gain, status, stuff. Get lots of stuff. Right? So that's, those are the messages we've internalized, and therefore the people that are written about are the people who have all that stuff. Right? The celebrities and all their life of pleasure and beauty and, you know what I mean? Oh, and the wealthy and the, used to be billionaires, millionaires, soon they'll be, trillionaires, right? We'll just, that's what I want to be. But who's talking about human happiness, well-being? Who's talking about compassion for those who are suffering? Who's talking about, treating all beings as our friends and caring about them? talking about let's understand each other, let's accept each other, let's learn to live at peace with each other, let's learn to listen to each other, even if they're saying things and have views that are different than mine. Right? Who's telling us that? Nobody in the public arena. So it's an arena endlessly of conflict, power over, control, manipulation. Yeah. So for many of us, a spiritual path also gives us some understanding of the potential within each of us for, as Tammy asked, for me, it's like there's no, happiness is the result of. Well, it's the result of. Yeah, no, it can be the goal, but it's not like, there, I know, I'm just going to be happy, happy, happy. Smiley face all the time. No. Happiness is something it's a mind state. And if we're cultivating, if our minds are riled up, if we're always angry or irritated or disappointed or anxious or fearful of all those things, those kinds of mind states don't contribute to happiness. They contribute to suffering. This world of ours has the possibility of giving us endlessly lots of short-term happiness. Such as what? Right? I mean, what do people do all the time to be happy?
Food, shopping.
What? Yeah. Food, shopping, what? Entertaining. Recreation, do fun things. Right? Drink, drug, all kinds of things. I mean, I could go on, have sex, there are all kinds of things that we do because we want to be happy. And when we do these events, are we happy? Yes. The problem is what? The Buddhists, it's not like denying that there aren't many things in the world that give us short-term happiness. The problem is what?
It's external.
They're not sustainable. So we endlessly are what? If we want to be happy in the way of the world, we endlessly have to be what? Very busy. Very, very busy. Controlling and manipulating life and situations to get everything set up away, right? And it's not going to last anyhow. Because why? Because everything's impermanent. So a spiritual path is giving us the ability to go, since happiness and unhappiness are mind states. Is that clear? Happiness and unhappiness are mind states. Oh, I get it. Why am I looking out there and doing all this hard work, control, manipulation, to get happy when happiness is an internal mind state? If I could just learn to cultivate those mind states and those actions that support happiness, I have the capacity of what? Being happy in an unconditioned way. A peaceful mind and a mind in conflict is a mind. I can create the basis in my own mind for inner peace and for happiness. And when I say happiness, I don't mean like smile. There's lots of things in life that are difficult. When I mean happiness, I mean there's like an inner state of well-being. Inner state of well-being, inner peace, calmness. In Buddhism, we use the word equanimity. No matter what's going on. Because on the one hand, I have understanding that we talked about earlier. I have awareness. awareness. And I know how to, even in dark situations, I know how to cultivate mind states that create well-being, such as what? Well, meditation, but also gratitude, compassion, loving kindness. Anybody ever feel those kinds of things? How do they feel? Good. You see, I mean, we know that. Oh, that feels good. Yeah, so when I read about the suffering of the world, or suffering of situations, or what just happened in New Orleans, I generate compassion. I understand this world and the suffering of this world. Right? And we want people to be free of suffering. So we generate mind states that feel good, that nurture my well-being. So even in difficult times, we have understanding, we have compassion, we have patience, we have kindness. Right? I know I can't control the external world, but I can control how I relate to it. So that's what a spiritual path gives us. So, and we're in a new year. Angie has been working very diligently with her team in creating a whole calendar. I'm just talking about in our community of workshops, classes, retreats, intensives, right? To support our capacity, to nurture our capacity to learn ways of being in the world in a healthy way. We have classes, and I'm not just saying like we, but I'm just saying, it has to be brought into the world. Because all these other energies that we talked about that are in the world or within our own conditioning is very strong. So the whole reason to have a place like this is to, put another energy into the world, and to put another energy that becomes available to people. So we have classes about how to heal one's emotional wounds, how to live a mindful life, right? Things like that. Retreats where you can kind of go more in depth. We have the same thing in terms of the Dharma and the teachings of the Buddha, and we have all kinds. So if you go to online and you look at our 3 paths, you'll see that we have a whole program that allows everybody, no matter where you're at, to find ways to nurture that inner transformation. Okay? As well as Diane over there is developing and now reworking our self-assessment questionnaire. So it's a tool for members to find out, do your own assessment and see, these are competencies and abilities that I've developed, and these are things where I have to work that. So that's a very helpful way, and thank you, Diane. Psychological background helps us do that. So people have a tool to see where they're at, and to access the programs and the classes or retreats or intensive that they need at all different levels. We have 3 paths that go from mindful living through the Dharma, through the wisdom path, which is about direct insight into the nature of mind and deep things like that. So it's a new year. I'll circle back to where I started. It's a new year. And for all of us, this can be a good year. But whether it is or not is in whose hands? Yeah. And that's, there's such freedom in that. Many of us still live our life based on past conditioning, what's happening out there, what happened in my past. There's no freedom in that. So, learning that I can, no matter what the situation is, causes and conditions of my life, no matter what's going on out there, how I relate to all that, inner and outer, that's within the realm of my control. And then I got to find the right tools. So, questions, challenges. Anybody online, just chat into Brian. Anybody in the hall, just raise your hand. I've kind of put out a bunch of stuff today, but I just wanted to give you, you don't have to remember it all, but just a sense of possibility in this new year. Everybody signing up for the program? Any questions? Any hesitancies? Anything's not clear? Don't be shy. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I don't have a question, but
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to express this is my first time here, and I'm very happy to be here. Actually, I moved from the DC area not too long ago, and I have been searching for a Buddhist center like this. So I found you online, and I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Again, online, just chat it in. But again, I don't know. I guess the important thing is that, what I'd like you to leave with today is a sense of your own possibility and a commitment. It doesn't mean like I was joking when you said everybody ready to sign up. But that you're willing, when you leave here, to reflect on what you heard today. And does it make sense to you? The Buddha said, going back to the Buddha, with his, and he had many students, many people came to listen, he said, hear my teachings, reflect on my teachings, then practice. And many of us, because, we've lost that capacity to really think, right? We go from hearing the teachings, reading the teachings, all right, I'm going to practice, right? And then it doesn't go right. Because we haven't done what the Buddha said. He said, don't practice until you've reflected and it really makes, he said, do not take my teachings based because I said them. Because you respect me, you love, blah, blah, blah. He said, that's where we meet. He said, but you need to reflect. Do these teachings accord, with my rational mind? They make sense to me. They're logical. Do they speak to my experience in life? Right. So we need to reflect, and the more deeply we reflect, the reflection is becomes our ownership. Oh yeah, I've reflected. Yeah. So when we make a decision, I'm going to practice, right? It's coming from a place where there has been a kind of an inner transformation where I know this is right for me. I know this is good for me. I know this is something that I want to make a commitment to within myself. And when you bring that energy to practicing, you will find your practice will be more steady and consistent. But if you don't do that, if it just sounds good, or if it's like, oh yeah, it's like the new year, yeah, spirituality, it's kind of been lacking in my life, I got to get some spirituality into it. It's not going to work. Right? That gets us in the door, you see. That gets us in the door, so that's good, but we need to take the time to reflect. Why practice? Why meditate? It's good for me. Yeah, but 5 minutes into it, you get bored, or your legs hurt, or you got too many thoughts. You know what I mean? There's got to be a deeper reason why we meditate, like what I talked about today. Yeah, I want to develop a capacity for self-awareness. I want to be able to observe objectively the actions of my body, speech, and mind, my thoughts, so I can make choices. You know what I mean? There's got to be a reason why to stick with any kind of discipline. You know, if there's no reason, you know, when we get bored or it becomes tedious or, you know. Check the email, check the text, you know. Right? So much easier. So this reflection piece is important.
Fred,
Yeah?
since I have the mic.
Okay.
Yeah, so you've covered a lot of wonderful, inspirational kind of words this morning, and I wanted to just, particularly on the 3 paths, just let people know. I mean, Fred's sort of developed his 3 paths here based on having a very diverse background in Buddhism, and this is all on the website. But we actually flipped on totally new path pages last night. So if you've been around for a long time or you're brand new, please take a look under programs at 3 Paths, because what we really tried to do is look at what is Fred trying to develop in us at the Mindful Living Path, and what is the curriculum that one can use to develop in those areas. What about at the Dharma Path? So you'll find quite a difference in what's been there before, with an effort really kind of under Fred's guidance to help us focus in what sometimes feels like a fire hose of Dharma here. If you take a look at the calendar for 2025, you're going to see all the save the dates for retreats, for classes. There's a lot of Dharma. But what Diane's self-assessment update is going to do is help each one of us, no matter how long we've been here, come back and say, what would be beneficial for me to focus on? And then it's all laid out. So we're hoping this will be supportive for you this year.
Thank you. And again, in terms, your words, fire hose. But again, we have a community of over 300 members, as well as, like here, we have many non-members who also participate in things. So the reason we do lots of different kinds of classes and retreats is, it's not like all 300 people come to the same thing, right? So, maybe 50 come to this one, or 25 come to that one. Or, you see what I'm saying? So by offering a diversity, we're trying to kind of, meet the diversity of the people who come to us, all different levels of their own personal development, practice, etc. Well, thank you all. Happy New Year.